May I start now? Good morning, everyone. I am Rajata, lecturer in history, BN Autonomous College, Jajpur Road. Today, I will devote this class to make you understand the Great Revolt of 1857. So, today our learning objectives. Today, we'll try to understand the background of the Revolt of 1857. We'll try to explain the nature of the Revolt of 1857, or to understand the causes of the Revolt of 1857. Then we'll talk how the revolt outbreak and spread all over the India. Then we'll talk why this revolt failed, or the causes of the failure. Then we'll understand the consequence of the revolt of 1857. Okay, next slide. Okay, so before I start about 1857 revolt, I want to give you a few facts or information that will help you to understand the revolt. This revolt, when we called about 1857, the revolt of 1857 was a measure of upheaval against the British rule, in which the disgruntled princes, to disconnected sipais and disillusioned elements participated. So when we are talking about 1857, we have to understand that it started from 10th May 1857 and lasted till 1st November 1858. That means it almost lasted for 1 year, 6 months. Then where it began? It's began from the city of Meerut. And when we're talking about 1857, we have to understand that lotus and bread were circulated before the uprising of 1857. So the symbol of the revolt of 1857 can be said the lotus and bread. So where, the main centers of the revolt, we have to understand Delhi, Lucknow, Jhansi, Gwalior and Kanpur were the main centers of the revolt. Then who was the British Prime Minister at the time of 1857 revolt? We have to understand Lord Palmerston was the Prime Minister of British, and Queen Victoria was the Queen of British. Then Lord Charles Canning, or Lord Canning was the Governor General of India. Then that time Bahadur Shah II or Bahadur Shah Jafar was the Emperor or Badshah of Mughal India. Then the Commander-in-Chief who suppressed the revolt, or the Commander-in-Chief of the Army of East India Company, Sir Colin Campbell. These are the facts you have to understand. So next we'll talk about the nature and character of the revolt. When we are talking about nature and the character of revolt, in Odia we are talking about the Swarupa. The historians have divergent opinions regarding the nature of uprising. The British considered it just a military revolt, which had neither the leadership of any of the Indian leaders nor the cooperation of the people. But on the other hand, the Indian patriots considered that uprising as a national war of independence. As a whole, there are the main following of views. We can say that historians have different opinions. Few said it's basically the colonial historian or the imperial historian. They said it's a military revolt or a Sipai revolt or Sipai mutiny only. And the Indians, the patriots, they speak it's a national uprising or national revolt or a national war of independence. Few historians or Marxist historians, they said it's a peasant revolution or peasant reaction. And some said it's a racial struggle for supremacy between black and white. And some say it's a religious war against Christians. And some said it's a Hindu-Muslim conspiracy. So there are different opinions regarding the nature of 1857 revolt. We have to understand that what are the opinions and who said what. Okay, next. When we're talking about it's a military revolt, there are many imperial historians or colonial historians like Sir John Lawrence, Sille, Kay, Malaysian, or Trevelyan, Holmes, and P. Roberts. They have painted it as a Sipai mutiny, confined to the army which did not command the support of the people at a large. They have their own opinions. They said that first the Sipai revolted and getting the opportunities like Kanpur, like Lucknow, like Jhansi, Queen, they joined when the Sipais revolted. A similar view was held by the many contemporary Indians like Munshi Jivanlal, Moinuddin, both were the eyewitness of Delhi, then Durgadas Bandyopadhyay, the eyewitness at Bareilly, the Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, he wrote one book, Asbabe Bagawat Hind. In his Asbabe Bagawat Hind, he also said it's a Sipahi mutiny. Then one of the prominent Indian historian in post-independence era, H. Majumdar, in his book, The Sipahi Mutiny and the Revolt of 1857, he argues the revolt of 1857 was a war of independence. He writes it was neither fast nor national nor a war of independence. According to him, it's only a Sipahi mutiny. So next. And national historians or the patriots, they said it's a fast war of independence or national uprising. If we talk about Dr. K.M. Panikar, Jayachand Vidyalankar, Ashok Mehta, they have called it as a national revolt. And whereas Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, who wrote the book The Indian War of Independence, he said it is a fast war of independence. Lala Lajpat Rai in his Young India described the revolt of 1857 as both political as well as national uprising. And Subhash Chandra Bose also regarded the revolt of 1857 as a national uprising rather than Sipahi mutiny. The contemporary leader of Conservative Party of England, Benjamin Disraeli, also called it as a national mutiny. And Dr. S.N. Sen held the view that the revolt of 1857 was a war of independence. He argues that it began as a fight for religion and ended as a war of independence. And Dr. S.B. Chaudhary also said a similar view. He said in his book, Civil Rebellions in the Indian Mutiny, 1857 to 59, he regards the outbreak of 1857 as something close to a war of independence. Other views, if we talk about other historians, Marxist or imperial or national, they have other opinion also. According to L.E. Rees, it was a religious war against Christians. According to Captain J.G. Medley, described it as a racial struggle for supremacy between the blacks and the whites. English historians, led by T.R. Holmes, popularized the view that the revolt of 1857 was a conflict between civilization and barbarism, or a struggle between Oriental or Occidental civilization and culture. So, people talk about Sir James Outram and W. Taylor. They describe the revolt of 1857 as the result of a Hindu-Muslim conspiracy. And according to Jawaharlal Nehru, whom we consider one of the Marxist writers, he said the revolt of 1857 was essentially a feudal outburst, headed by feudal chiefs and their followers, and aided by the widespread anti-foreign sentiments. So basically, if we talk in Odia, 1857 ବିଦ୍ରୋହକୁ ଭିନ୍ନ ଭିନ୍ନ ସ୍ୱରୂପରେ ଭିନ୍ନ ଭିନ୍ନ ଐତିହାସିକ ଦେଖିଛନ୍ତି। କିଛି ଐତିହାସିକ ତାକୁ ଏକ ସିପାହୀ ବିଦ୍ରୋହ ବୋଲି ଆଖ୍ୟା ଦେଉଛନ୍ତି, କିଛି ଐତିହାସିକ ତାକୁ ଏକ ନ୍ୟାସନାଲ ଅପରାଇଜିଂ ବା ଜାତୀୟ ବିଦ୍ରୋହର ଆଖ୍ୟା ଦେଉଛନ୍ତି, ଆଉ କିଛି କହୁଛନ୍ତି ଏହା ଗୋଟେ ହିନ୍ଦୁ ଆଉ ମୁସଲମାନଙ୍କର ଷଡ଼ଯନ୍ତ୍ର, କିଛି କହୁଛନ୍ତି ସଭ୍ୟ ଓ ଅସଭ୍ୟଙ୍କ ମଧ୍ୟରେ ଗୋଟେ ଷ୍ଟ୍ରଗଲ ବା ସଂଗ୍ରାମ। ତ ଭିନ୍ନ ଭିନ୍ନ ଐତିହାସିକ ଏହାକୁ ଭିନ୍ନ ଭିନ୍ନ ରୂପେ ଦେଖିଛନ୍ତି। ନେକ୍ସଟ। So now, if we'll talk about why the feud like that, if we'll talk about basically the colonial historian, they have their own point of view, national historian, they have their own point of view, and Marxist historian, they have their own point of view. According to Marxist historians, it is outburst of peasants. According to colonial historian, it's only a Sipahi mutiny. Because it started from Sipahi, then other elements joined in this revolt. प्रथम एटा सिपाही को द्वारा आरंभ होइतिला आ सिपाही इ विद्रोह कला परे अन्य माने सुजोग पाई एथरे जोग देथिले। ओके, सो नाउ वी अंडरस्टूड व्हाट आर द ओपिनियंस ऑफ द हिस्टोरियंस। ऐतिहासिक माने ए विषय को मत देइचंती। एबे आमे देखिबा जे ए विद्रोहर कारण कोन, व्हाट आर द कॉजेस ऑफ द रिवोल्ट ऑफ 1857। ओके, सो बेसिकली वी डिवाइडेड इट इन 5 different parts. Political and administrative causes, economical causes, socio and religious causes, military causes, and immediate cause. Next. And when we talk about political and administrative cause, we have to understand that the Britishers' policy of expansion was the major cause of 1857 revolt. The British policy of territorial expansion and gradual annexation of the native Indian states was one of the major grievances of the Indian rulers. Ever since the Battle of Plassey, the East India Company territorial power increased rapidly. The Britishers tried to expand their political power in India by various ways. আমি যদি দেখিবা প্রথমে 1757 রে পলাশী যুদ্ধ, 1764 রে বক্সার যুদ্ধ পরে আংলো মহীশূর ওয়ার, আংলো মারাঠা ওয়ার, এভাবে অনেক যুদ্ধরে ব্রিটিশর মানে তাଙ୍କର ସାମ୍ରାଜ୍ୟକୁ ବିସ୍ତାର କରିଥିଲେ। এই যে যুদ্ধরে যে রাজা মানে হরুଥିଲେ সেমানଙ୍କର সৈন্য মানে ସବୁ ଚାକିରି ହରଉଥିଲେ, ସେଠାକାର କାର୍ଯ୍ୟରତ ଅନ୍ୟାନ୍ୟ ଲୋକମାନେ ବି ତାଙ୍କର ଚାକିରି ହରଉଥିଲେ, ତାଙ୍କ ମଧ୍ୟରେ ଗୋଟେ ଅସନ୍ତୋଷ ଥିଲା। ଦେ ଅଲ୍ ଆର୍ ଡିସାଟିସ୍ଫାଏଡ୍ and after war and conquest we will talk about another cause, its subsidiary alliance. In 1798 Lord Wellesley or Lord Wellesley he brought subsidiary alliance, ଯାହାକୁ ଆମେ ସାମନ୍ତ ସନ୍ଧି ପ୍ରଥା ବୋଲି କହୁଛେ। And in subsidiary alliance, basically subsidiary alliance it's means one of the policy to expand British territory in India. In this policy that whoever will sign this treaty or subsidiary alliance, ଯିଏ ବି ସାମନ୍ତ ସନ୍ଧି ପ୍ରଥା ରେ ହସ୍ତାକ୍ଷର କରିବ ତାଙ୍କୁ ରାଜି ହେବାକୁ ପଡ଼ିବ ଯେ ତାଙ୍କ ନିଜ ଆର୍ମି ଦେ ହାଭ୍ ଟୁ ଡିସବ୍ୟାଣ୍ଡ ଦେୟାର ଓନ୍ ଆର୍ମି, ତାଙ୍କୁ ସେନା ରଖିବେନି, ତାଙ୍କ ଜାଗାରେ ବ୍ରିଟିଶର ଜଣେ ରିଜେଣ୍ଟ ରହିବେ, ସେମାନେ ଅନ୍ୟମାନଙ୍କ ସହିତ କୌଣସି ଡିପ୍ଲୋମାଟିକ ରିଲେସନ ବା କୂଟନୈତିକ ରିଲେସନ ରଖିବେ ନାହିଁ, ସେମାନେ ଅନ୍ୟ କୌଣସି ୟୁରୋପିଆନକୁ ତାଙ୍କ ଜାଗାରେ ନିଯୁକ୍ତି କରିବେ ନାହିଁ। ଆଉ ଏହା ଦ୍ୱାରା ଯେଉଁ ଗୋଟିଏ ସୈନ୍ୟ ଦଳ ବ୍ରିଟିଶଙ୍କର ସେ ଯାଇକି ରହିବେ କୋଉଠି ନା ଯେଉଁ ପ୍ରୋଟେକ୍ଟେଡ୍ ଷ୍ଟେଟ୍ ବା ଯିଏ ଏଇ ସନ୍ଧି ସାଇନ୍ କରିବ, ସନ୍ଧିରେ ହସ୍ତାକ୍ଷର କରିବ ତାଙ୍କ ଏରିଆରେ ଯାଇ ରହିବେ, ଆଉ ତାହାର ଭରଣ ପୋଷଣ ତାହାର ମେଣ୍ଟେନାନ୍ସ ଦାୟିତ୍ୱ ସେଇ ରାଜା ନେବେ। ଏହା ଦ୍ୱାରା କ'ଣ ହେଲା ନା ଯେଉଁ ରାଜାମାନେ ପ୍ରଥମେ ଯଦି ଦେଖିବା 1798 ପ୍ରଥମେ ହାଇଦ୍ରାବାଦ ପରେ 1799 ମହୀଶୂର, ଦେନ୍ 1799 ତାଞ୍ଜୋର, after Tanjore in 1801 it's Awadh, in 1802 it's we can say Peshwa, Bajirao II signed the treaty, after Peshwa it's Bhonsle, after Bhonsle it's Scindia, they all signed this subsidiary alliance. Due to the subsidiary alliance, for maintenance of British troops in their territory, they have to pay larger amount of revenue or larger amount of taxes. That became a burden for that particular area's people. ସେ ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କୁ ଅଧିକ କର ଦେବାକୁ ପଡ଼ିଲା, ସେ ଯେଉଁ ଆର୍ମି ଥିଲା ସେ ଡିସବାନ୍ ହେବା ଦ୍ୱାରା ସେମାନେ ସବୁ ଚାକିରି ହରାଇଲେ, ଆଉ ତାଙ୍କ ମଧ୍ୟରେ ଗୋଟେ ଅସନ୍ତୋଷ ରହିଲା ବ୍ରିଟିଶ ଶାସନକୁ ନେଇକି, ଇଷ୍ଟ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆ କମ୍ପାନୀର ଶାସନକୁ ନେଇକି। ଆଫ୍ଟର ସବସିଡିଆରୀ ଆଲାଏନ୍ସ वी कैन से डक्ट्रिन ऑफ लैप्स ऑन द प्रिटेक्स्ट ऑफ alleged misrule also. এই डक्ट्रिन ऑफ लैप्स ଯଦି କହିବା ଏକୁ 1848 ଆଣିଥିଲେ ଲର୍ଡ ଡେଲହାଉସି। ଲର୍ଡ ଡେଲହାଉସି ଯେଉଁ ଆଣିଥିଲେ ଏଟାକୁ ଆମେ ରାଜସ୍ୱ ଲୋପ ନୀତି ବୋଲି କହୁଛେ। ଇନ୍ ଡକ୍ଟ୍ରିନ ଅଫ ଲैप्स that those kings who haven't any natural male hire, ଯାହାର ନିଜର ପୁଅ ନାହିଁ, ସେମାନେ କୌଣସି ପୋଷ୍ୟପୁତ୍ର ରଖିପାରିବେନି କି ପୋଷ୍ୟପୁତ୍ରକୁ ତାଙ୍କ ରାଜ୍ୟର ଭାର ଦିଆଯିବନି, ସେ କେବଳ ତାଙ୍କ ବ୍ୟକ୍ତିଗତ ସମ୍ପତ୍ତିର ମାଲିକ ହୋଇପାରିବେ। ଏହା କହିଲେ କି ନା ସେ ସମୟର ପରିସ୍ଥିତି, ସେ ସମୟର ସିଚୁଏସନ ଦେଖିକି ଏଟା ଆରମ୍ଭ କରିଥିଲେ ଲର୍ଡ ଡେଲହାଉସି। ଆଉ ଏଇ 1848 ପ୍ରଥମେ ସତାରା ପରେ ତମର ଯାଜପୁର, ସମ୍ବଲପୁର, 1848 ଗଲା ସତାରା, ସେ 1848 ଆସିବ ଯାଜପୁର, 1849 ସମ୍ବଲପୁର, ସେ 1880 ବଘାଟ, after Baghat it's Udaipur in 1850, then after Udaipur it's Jhansi in 1853, then Nagpur in 1854. They all were annexed because they haven't any male hire. After that also they Lord Dalhousie also annexed Awadh in the name of alleged misrule. କୁଶାସନ ନାମ ଦେଇକି ସେତେବେଳକୁ ୱାଜିଦ ଅଲି ଶାହ ଥାନ୍ତି ଅବଧର ନବାବ, ତାଙ୍କୁ ଗାଦିଚ୍ୟୁତ କରିକି ସେ ସମ୍ପୂର୍ଣ୍ଣ ଅବଧର ଟେରିଟୋରୀ ଯୋଉଟା ଆମେ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ ଉତ୍ତରପ୍ରଦେଶ ବୋଲି କହୁଛେ, ସେ ଲକ୍ଷ୍ନୌକୁ ମିଶେଇ ସେ ଜାଗାଟାକୁ ସେ ଆନେକ୍ସ କରିନେଇଥିଲେ, ନିଜ ଇଷ୍ଟ ଇଣ୍ଡିଆ କମ୍ପାନୀର ଯୋଉ ସାମ୍ରାଜ୍ୟ ସହିତ ମିଶେଇ ଦେଇଥିଲେ। ଏହାଦ୍ୱାରା କ'ଣ ହେଲା ନା ସେଠାକାରେ ରହୁଥିବା ଲୋକମାନେ, ସେଠାକାରେ ରହୁଥିବା ରାଜ ପରିବାର ସମସ୍ତେ ଅସନ୍ତୋଷ ହେଲେ। ୱାଜିଦ ଅଲି ଶାହଙ୍କ ପତ୍ନୀ ହଜରତ ମହଲ, ତାଙ୍କ ପୁଅ ବିଜଲିସ୍ କାଦିର, ସେମାନେ ଏଥିରେ ବହୁତ ଅସନ୍ତୋଷ ହେଲେ ଆଉ 1857 ବିଦ୍ରୋହରେ ସେ ଗୋଟେ ବଡ଼ ଭୂମିକା ନିର୍ବାହ କରିଥିଲେ। If you talk about humiliating or Ross policy toward the successor of the Mughals, that there are many policies which dissatisfied the Mughals also, and those are believing in Mughals also. If you talk about Bahadur Shah Jafar or Bahadur Shah II, प्रथमे लॉर्ड एलेनब्रोक से कौन कले ना जो मुगल सम्राट थे बहादुर शाह से गोटे दरबार बसौले, दरबार को डिसबैन करदे से लोक मान गोटे खिल दौले दामी वस्त्र प्रदान करते ताकू भी बंद करदे ता बाद सी गोटे नजराना जोटा कहते से ग्रहण करती कौन गोटे अकेजन रे ताकू भी बंद करदे तो आफ्टर लॉर्ड ऑकलैंड लॉर्ड एलनबर्ग कौन करेंगे ना जो सिक्का होता मुगल बादशाह ना छुपा होता से बाहर करदे आफ्टर दैट लॉर्ड डेलहाउसी से कहले जे तमे लाल किला रहबनी तमे जाई कुतुब मीनार पाखर थिला गोटे छोट घरे रहइबो आ जो रॉयल टाइटल थिला ताकू रिमूव करिया पय लॉर्ड कैनिंग चाहिले तो ए सब गवर्नर जनरल से समय जो सब एक्शन नेले से कौन हला ना से ब्रिटिश जो एक्शन रहिला ताहा कौन हला ना दो मुगल को दोज आर बिलीविंग इन मुगल्स dissatisfied them. Okay, that's why they joined in the revolt of 1857. Then if we talk about India जो governed by foreign land, East India Company तार निज डायरेक्टर थिले तार बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स थिले से माने ही शासन करूथिले कोठो ना इंग्लैंड रु भारत तांका निर्देश रे भारत शासन होतला तेनु भारत गोटे फॉरेन लैंड शासित होतला एटा भी गोटे बड़ कारण आ लॉस ऑफ बेनिफिट एंड प्रिविलेजेस जदि देखिबो 1802 रे पेशवा बाजीराव सेकेंड से साइन करथिले सब्सिडरी अलायंस पर 1828 रे एंग्लो मराठा वार रे जतले मराठा माने हारी गले पेशवा बाजीराव द्वितीय को से माने मराठा साम्राज्य नहीं कि लखनऊ जो उत्तर प्रदेश से गोटे अच्छी कानपुर बिठू रे रखिले आ बाजीराव द्वितीय समय कौन पुत्र संतान नाला तेणु से धोदू पंथ बा जोटा जहाँ कहे नाना साहेब पोष्य पुत्र भाव ग्रहण करते से ब्रिटिशर्स से कहले जे ना आम दुपंत बा नाना साहेब को तुम उत्तराधिकार में ग्रहण करबनी जो वार्षिक 8 लाख टका पेंशन मिलूला से पेंशन को बंद करदे आ कहले तुमको हम पेशवा भाव ग्रहण करूँ ना ताहा भी गोटे बड़ कारण था जो नाना साहेब 1857 रिवोल्ट रे जोग देते जदि रानी झांसी कथा भी आम आनिबा रानी झांसी क्षेत्र में स्वामी गंगाधर राव मृत्यु पर से गोटे पोष्यपुत्र दामोदर राव ग्रहण करते कि पोष्यपुत्र को ब्रिटिश मैंने रेकग्नाइजेशन देवा मना करदे तो ये सब गोटे गोटे कारण जो कारण if you talk it, these are the political and administrative causes why they joined the 1857 revolt. Then if we talk about economic causes or arthanitic karana, economic exploitation of all sections, one of the major causes of 1857 revolt. The only interest of the company was the collection of maximum revenue with minimum efforts. Owing to their colonial policies of economic exploitation, industry, trade, commerce and agriculture languished and India became de-industrialized, impoverished and debt-ridden. जदि हम देखिबा ब्रिटिशर माने आम कृषि की नष्ट करदेले विशेष करके आमर जहाँ वर्तमान पर्यंत थिला से माने आमर उद्योग नष्ट करदेले से माने आमर आर्टिसियन मानकु कारीगर मानकु दरिद्र करदेले तो देयर आर मेनी कॉजेस इफ यू टॉक अबाउट इकोनॉमिकल कॉजेस the ruin of the mercantile class. The British deliberately crippled Indian trade and commerce by imposing high tariff duties against Indian goods. On the other hand, they encouraged the import of British goods to India. As a result, by the middle of the 19th century, Indian exports of cotton and silk goods partially came to an end. If you talk about that import and export, आमर विशेष करके वस्त्र चाहिदा बहुत है यूरोप रे आम बहुत वस्त्र विभिन्न प्रकार वूल है सिल्क है कटन है रप्तानी करुले हाई टैरिफ रेट लगे ब्रिटिशर जहाँपर आम रप्तानी हो पारानी आम कौन कले ना ब्रिटिशर मेसीन मेड गुड को इम्पोर्ट कले ए मेसीन मेड गुड जिते आम बजार में प्रवेश कला आमर जो इंडिजिनियस इंडस्ट्री थिला बा आमर जो देशी शिल्प थिला ताहा रियून हो गला बुणाकार माने जो वस्त्र तैयारी करुले मेसीन मेड प्रोडक्ट ता अपेक्षा कम दाम रे मिलिला तो मेसीन मेड प्रोडक्ट बाजार रे प्रवेश कला परे से बाजार रे आधिपत्य विस्तार कला आमर जो निजर देशी शिल्प था देशी उद्योग था ता सब नष्ट हो गला आमर मर्केंटाइल क्लास नष्ट हो गला तापर जदि हम देखिबा लैंड रेवेन्यू सिस्टम एटा डिसकंटेंट हो गला इफ यू टॉक अबाउट न्यू लैंड रेवेन्यू सिस्टम एंड डिसकंटेंट अमंग जमींदार that if you talk about in 23rd March 1793 if you talk about Lord Cornwallis, he introduced permanent settlement. Then in permanent settlement, that royals or the peasants, they became subordinate. Now Britishers directly dealt with zamindars. They have we can say treaty with zamindars. Zamindars will pay revenue to them. जॉन शोर से बोर्ड ऑफ रेवेन्यू डायरेक्टर थे गोटे आकलन अनुजाई जदि आम गोटे बजेट ना टंकाटे टंकाटे पाखापाखि 45% सरकार नहीं जाऊले 15% मझे जमीदार मनी लेंडर से जाऊले आ मात्र 40% ही बंचुला जोटा पाउले माने ना जो चाषी माने तो ये जो परमानेंट सेटलमेंट है रयतवारी सेटलमेंट जोड़ा है किए ना रयतवारी सेटलमेंट Captain Reed and Thomas Munro in 1820 they introduced Rayatwari settlement in Madras, first in Baramulla district, then all over the Madras. It's imposed in 51% of the territory. Then Mahalwari settlement in 1822 by Halt Mackenzie. These all means revenue policy or land revenue systems. They impoverished or daridra karidala. They impoverished our peasants. हमको दारिद्र करिदेला. Then if you talk about destruction of Indian manufacturers, already I said about that impost tax लागुतला से माने विभिन्न विशेष करके से माने भारत को तांको इंडस्ट्री पाई गोटे if you talk about for their industry they used India as a supplier of raw materials. Okay, they brought raw materials from India. They made finished products and sold it in India again. Next. So these are the economic causes. If we talk about economic causes, then railway निवेश कले, telegraph निवेश कले, और से थ्रू बहु परिमाण रे शुद्ध नेले. जो हा आम भारत ऊपर गोटे we can say people debt हे गला. Apart from that, आमर industry नष्ट हे गला, कृषि नष्ट हे गला, industry कृषि तो नष्ट हे गला. Automatically तमरो जो artisan class थला तांकर भी अधोगति घटिला से माने भी दारिद्र होई गले कारण लोकन पाखर पैसा नहीं आर्टिसन क्लास को हायर करिया पाई तांको नेकी कोनस करे परफॉर्म करिया पाई. तो देन वी विल टॉक अबाउट सोशियो एंड रिलीजियस कॉजेस. व्हाट आर द सोशियो एंड रिलीजियस कॉजेस which caused led the 1857 revolt? That social exclusiveness, the British policy of social exclusiveness and arrogant manner towards the Indian created discontent among the Indians. The British forced every native to salute all Englishmen in the streets. The British could insult, injure, assault and even kill Indians. से माने तकर आधिपत्य विस्तार करथले जतले चाली के जाउथले ब्रिटिशर माने इंडियन मान को सैल्यूट करिया पड़िबो तांको लॉय बागु पड़िबो ए सब प्रकार जोडा से मान निजको बड़ देखौथले भारतीय मान को छोटो देखौथले एहा आम ओदरे बड असंतोषर कारण थिला. तो इन्फ्लुएंस ऑफ पंडित एंड मौलाना also reduced. The British did not approve special privileges of Pandits and Maulanas, and British considered them equal to the common people. Due to the propagation of Western education, the respect and honor of the Pandit and Maulana was decreased. The Pandits and Maulanas thought that the British were responsible for that, and therefore they became the bitter enemies of the British Empire. So the Pandits and Maulanas propagated war against the Britishers. Then the missionary activities. The Charter Act of 1830, missionaries were permitted to enter the company's territory in India to propagate their religion and spread Western education. The Christian missionaries took every opportunity to expose and abuse the Hindus as well as the Islamic religion. Charter Act 1813 अनुजाई मिशनरी पर्सन माने भारत रे प्रवेश कले माने स्कूल प्रतिष्ठा कले लोक मानन को इस्लामिक बा क्रिश्चियन रिलीजियस इस्लाम आ हिंदू क्रिश्चियन को कन्वर्ट कले ए सब गोटे कारण थिला जोथि पई लोक माने बहुत असंतोष प्रकाश करथिले और जो माने 1857 रिवोल्ट रे जोग देले. नेक्स्ट, if we will talk about social legislations, the social legislations passed by the British also became the cause of the revolt of 1857. The British endeavored to eradicate the social evils like custom of sati, infanticide and child marriage, and they also encouraged widow remarriage, for which they passed various social legislations. If we talk about in 1829, with the help of Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Lord William Bentinck abolished the practice of sati. And people, those are रूढ़िवादी जो माने थिले समान सती प्रथा लोभ को सहज रे ग्रहण कले नाही. In 1843 also, the prohibition of practice of slavery, one of the major cause why people became dissatisfied with Britishers. Apart from that, the two laws of 1832 and 1850, or we can say removing disabilities due to the change of religion, particularly conferring the right of inheritance to change of religion, particularly conferring the right of inheritance to Christian converts, were quite unpopular among the Hindus. ଯଦି ଆମେ ଦେଖିବା 1850 ବେଳକୁ जो ଆକ୍ଟ ଆସିଲା ଲର୍ଡ ଡେଲହାଉସିଙ୍କ ସମୟରେ ଯେକୌଣସି ଗୋଟେ ହିନ୍ଦୁ କିମ୍ବା ଇସଲାମ ପିପଲ ଯିଏ ଅନ୍ୟ କୌଣସି ଧର୍ମକୁ ବା ଖ୍ରୀଷ୍ଟିଆନକୁ କନଭର୍ଟ କରିଯାଉଛି, ଧର୍ମ ପରିବର୍ତ୍ତନ କରିଦେଉଛି, ଧର୍ମାନ୍ତରୀକରଣ ହେଉଛି, ସିଏ ତା ନିଜ ପୈତୃକ ସମ୍ପତ୍ତି ହରାଇବ ନାହିଁ, ସେ ପୈତୃକ ସମ୍ପତ୍ତି ପାଇବ ଯାହା ପୂର୍ବରୁ ନଥିଲା। ସେମାନେ ଖ୍ରୀଷ୍ଟିଆନ କନଭର୍ଟକୁ କ'ଣ ନା ପ୍ରୋତ୍ସାହନ ଦେଲେ। ସେଇଥିପାଇଁ ଏଇଟା ଗୋଟେ ବଡ଼ କାରଣ ସାଜିଲା ଯେଉଁଥିପାଇଁ 1857 ରିଭୋଲ୍ଟ ଆଗେଇଗଲା। If we talk about Hindu Widow Remarriage Act in 1857 and the opening of the Western education for girls were the other causes why people revolted against East India Company's rule. 1856 ଲର୍ଡ ଡେଲହାଉସିଙ୍କ ସମୟରେ ୱିଡୋ ରିମାର୍ରିଜ୍ ବିଧବା ବିବାହ ପ୍ରଥା ପ୍ରଚଳିତ ହେଲା। ବିବାହ ବିଧବା ସହିତ ଝିଅମାନଙ୍କୁ ଶିକ୍ଷା ଦେବାର ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା ଆରମ୍ଭ ହେଲା। ତା ସହ ରେଲୱେ, ଟେଲିଗ୍ରାଫ ଅନ୍ୟାନ୍ୟ ଜିନିଷ ଲାଗୁ କରାଗଲା। ଏଥିରେ ଭାରତୀୟମାନେ ଭାବିଲେ ଯେ ଏମାନେ ଆମକୁ ୟୁରୋପିଆନ କରିବାକୁ ଚାହୁଁଛନ୍ତି, ଆମକୁ ଏମାନେ ଖ୍ରୀଷ୍ଟିଆନ କରିବାକୁ ଚାହୁଁଛନ୍ତି, ସେ ଆମ ଧର୍ମକୁ ନଷ୍ଟ କରିବାକୁ ଚାହୁଁଛନ୍ତି ଆଉ ନିଜ ଧର୍ମ ରକ୍ଷା ନାମରେ ଏମାନେ ଏଇ 1857 ବିଦ୍ରୋହରେ ଯୋଗ ଦେଲେ। ନେକ୍ସଟ, so these are the, if we talk, these are the causes why people revolted, Sipahis revolted and others revolted against the East India Company in 1857. Then other causes, if we talk, the military causes, the General Service Enlistment Act of 1856 was another cause of the revolt. The Indian soldiers notched grievances against the British as they were forced to go on expedition to Burma and Afghanistan, which violated their religious ethics. In order to prevent any kind of resistance from the Sipahis against their deployment abroad, in the year of 1856, the Lord Canning's government passed the General Service Enlistment Act. According to this, it was decided that no Sipahi who was enlisted under the act could refuse to fight across the sea. ସାତ ସମୁଦ୍ର ପାର ହେଲେ ହିନ୍ଦୁମାନଙ୍କର ଜାତି ପଳାଏ, ଏଇଟା ଗୋଟେ ଆମର କ'ଣ ଭାବନା ଥିଲା ବା ଏଇଟା ଗୋଟେ ବିଶ୍ୱାସ ଥିଲା। ସେ ବିଶ୍ୱାସ ଯୋଗୁଁ ଯେତେବେଳେ ଆଫଗାନିସ୍ତାନ ଲୋକ ଯାଉଥିଲେ କିମ୍ବା ଅନ୍ୟାନ୍ୟ ଜାଗାକୁ ଯୁଦ୍ଧ କରିବାକୁ ଯାଉଥିଲେ ସେତେବେଳେ ସେମାନେ ପ୍ରୋଟେଷ୍ଟ କରୁଥିଲେ। ତାକୁ ବନ୍ଦ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ଗୋଟେ ସେମାନେ ଆଣିଲେ ଜେନେରାଲ ସର୍ଭିସ ଏନଲିଷ୍ଟମେଣ୍ଟ ଆକ୍ଟ। ଇଟ୍ ମେକ୍ ଦ ବୋଥ୍ ଏଣ୍ଡସ୍ ମିଟ୍, ବଟ୍ ଅନ୍ ଦ contrary, the salaries of the British soldiers are much more than the Indian soldiers' salaries. As Indian soldiers used to get only ₹9 per month as salary, where the British soldiers get ₹60 to ₹70 per month as salary. Apart from this, there was no chance for the Indian soldiers to get promotion, but the British soldiers had many chances to get promotions. ଭାରତୀୟ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ପ୍ରମୋସନ ମିଳୁନଥିଲା, ଭାରତୀୟ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ଭାରତରେ ଯେଉଁମାନେ ସେନାବାହିନୀ ଥିଲେ ତାଙ୍କୁ ସଠିକ ସାଲାରୀ ମିଳୁନଥିଲା, ତାଙ୍କ ପ୍ରତିପକ୍ଷ ବ୍ରିଟିଶ ଅନୁସାରେ ସେମାନେ ଅଧିକ ସାଲାରୀ ପାଉଥିଲେ, ଏମାନେ କମ୍ ସାଲାରୀ ପାଉଥିଲେ, ଏମାନଙ୍କୁ ଖରାପ ବ୍ୟବହାର କରାଯାଉଥିଲା। ଏ ସବୁ ଗୋଟେ କାରଣ ଥିଲା ଯୋଉଥିପାଇଁ ସିପାହୀମାନେ ବିଦ୍ରୋହକୁ ଓହ୍ଲାଇଥିଲେ। ନେକ୍ସଟ, the Indian soldiers impatient of regarding their old privileges. If you talk about old privileges, whenever the soldiers went on actual war, they were paid foreign service allowances known as bhatta. When the soldiers refused from the conquest of Sindh in 1843, they were not given any such allowance. The Indian soldiers also had a free postal facility where they could send letters free of charge anywhere in India. But in 1854, Lord Dalhousie stopped even this facility. ବାହାରକୁ ଗଲେ ତାକୁ ଗୋଟେ ସ୍ୱତନ୍ତ୍ର ପ୍ରକାର ଭତ୍ତା ମିଳୁଥିଲା, ଆଲାଉନ୍ସ ମିଳୁଥିଲା। ଯଦି କହିବା ଯେ ଯେଉଁ ପୋଷ୍ଟାଲ ନିୟମ ନୂଆ ଆସିଲା, ଆଗରୁ କ'ଣ ଥିଲା ନା ସେମାନେ ତାଙ୍କ ପରିବାର ପାଖକୁ ବିନା ମୂଲ୍ୟରେ ଚିଠି ପଠାଇ ପାରୁଥିଲେ, କିନ୍ତୁ ଲର୍ଡ ଡେଲହାଉସିଙ୍କ ସମୟରେ ଯେଉଁ 1854 ପୋଷ୍ଟାଲ ଆକ୍ଟ ଆସିଲା ସେ ଅନୁଯାୟୀ ଏମାନଙ୍କୁ ବି ପଇସା ଦେବାକୁ ପଡ଼ିଲା, ଯେଉଁଟା ଗୋଟେ ଡିସକଣ୍ଟେଣ୍ଟ ଥିଲା, ଯେଉଁଟା ଗୋଟେ ଅସନ୍ତୋଷ ଥିଲା, ପରବର୍ତ୍ତୀ ସମୟରେ ବିଦ୍ରୋହର ରୂପ ନେଲା। Next, then we will talk about the immediate cause. The several mentioned factors prepared a general ground for discontent and disaffections among different sections of Indian people, which required a mere spark of explosion into a forest fire. The greased cartridges provide this spark. It was in 1856 when, according to a regulation, the Sipahis were required to bite the end of the cartridge before using it. There was a rumor that the cartridges to be used with new Enfield rifles were greased with the fat of cows and pigs. One of them was sacred to Hindus, cow, while the other was forbidden to the Muslims, pigs. On account of their ignorance, the British government denied the truth of this allegation. However, on a secret inquiry, it was later found that actually the fat of cows and pigs had been used. ଯଦି ଆମେ ଦେଖିବା ସେ ସମୟରେ କ'ଣ ଥିଲା ନା ୟା ପୂର୍ବରୁ 1856 ସମୟରେ ଗୋଟେ ବ୍ରାଉନ୍ ବେସ୍ ରାଇଫଲ ୟୁଜ୍ ହେଉଥିଲା। ଏ ବ୍ରାଉନ୍ ବେସ୍ ରାଇଫଲରେ କ'ଣ ଥିଲା ନା ଗୋଟେ ବହୁତ ବଡ଼ ବନ୍ଧୁକ, ଏଇ ବନ୍ଧୁକରେ ପ୍ରଥମେ ବାରୁଦ ଭର୍ତ୍ତି କରାଯିବ, ବାରୁଦ ଭର୍ତ୍ତି କରାଗଲା ପରେ ଗୋଟେ ଲମ୍ବା ବାଡ଼ି ଭଳିଆ ଗୋଟେ ଥାଏ, ସେଥିରେ ତାକୁ ଖେଞ୍ଚା ଯାଇ ଭର୍ତ୍ତି କରାଯାଏ, ତାପରେ ଗୁଳି ପୁରାଯାଏ, ତାପରେ ମରାଯାଏ, ଯେଉଁଥିରେ ପରିମାଣ ଏକର ସେକର ହେଲେ ସେ ଗୁଳି ଫୁଟେନି କି ଅଳ୍ପ ବାଟରେ ପଡ଼ିଯାଏ। ଏମାନେ ସେ ଯୋଗୁଁ ଗୋଟେ ସ୍ୱତନ୍ତ୍ର ଗୋଟେ ୟୁନିଭର୍ସାଲ କ୍ୟାଟେଗୋରୀ ସିଷ୍ଟମ ଆରମ୍ଭ କଲେ, ଯେଉଁଥିରେ ବାରୁଦ ଆଉ ଗୁଳି ଏକା ସାଙ୍ଗରେ ଥାଏ, ତାକୁ ଭର୍ତ୍ତି କରାଯିବ, ତାପରେ ଗୁଳି ମରାଯିବ। ଏହାଦ୍ୱାରା ବହୁତ ସହଜ ହେବ କୌଣସି ଜାଗାରେ ଗୁଳି କରିବା ପାଇଁ, କାରଣ ବାରୁଦ ପୁରେଇବା, ତାକୁ ଖେଞ୍ଚିବା, ଭର୍ତ୍ତି କରିବା, ତାପରେ ଗୁଳି ପୁରେଇ ମାରିବା, ଏଇଟା ବହୁତ ସମୟ ସାପେକ୍ଷ ଥିଲା। ତ ଏଇ ଯେଉଁ ନୂଆ ଏନଫିଲ୍ଡ ରାଇଫଲ ପାଇଁ ଯେଉଁ କ୍ୟାଟେଗୋରୀ ଆସିଲା, ସେ କ୍ୟାଟେଗୋରୀଟାକୁ ଜଣ ନେଇକି ଗଲା ବେଳକୁ ବର୍ଷା ହେଉଛି, ପାଣି ଅଛି, ବିଭିନ୍ନ ମୋଇଶ୍ଚର ଅଛି ଏୟାରରେ, ସେ ନଷ୍ଟ ହେଇଯିବାର ଚାନ୍ସ ଥିଲା। ତେଣୁ ସେଇ କ୍ୟାଟେଗୋରୀ ଉପରେ ବା ଗୋଳା ଆଉ ଯେଉଁ ବାରୁଦ ରହିଲା, ଗୁଳି ରହିଲା, ତା ଉପରେ ଗୋଟେ କୋଟ୍ ଦିଆହେଉଥିଲା। ଏ କୋଟ୍ଟା କ'ଣ ନା ଗୋଟେ ଆନିମାଲ ଫ୍ୟାଟ୍ କୋଟ୍, ନଷ୍ଟ ହେବାନି ପାଇଁ। ଆଉ ସେଇ ଆନିମାଲ ଫ୍ୟାଟ୍ ଯେଉଁ କୋଟ୍ ଦିଆହେଉଥିଲା, ତାହା ଗାଈ ଆଉ ଘୁଷୁରୀର ବୋଲି ସେ ସମୟରେ କୁହାଗଲା। ତ ଏଇଟା ଗୋଟେ ବଡ଼ ଡିସକଣ୍ଟେଣ୍ଟ ହେଲା, ଗୋଟେ ବଡ଼ ଅପହେବନ ହେଲା, ଯେଉଁଥିପାଇଁ ସେ ସମୟର ସିପାହୀମାନେ ବିଦ୍ରୋହ କଲେ। ଡିସେମ୍ବର 1856ରେ ହିଁ ଏଇ ଏନଫିଲ୍ଡ ରାଇଫଲ ଇଣ୍ଟ୍ରୋଡ୍ୟୁସ୍ ହେଇଥିଲା ଇଣ୍ଡିଆନ୍ ଆର୍ମିରେ। Then we'll talk about how its outbreak of the revolt of 1857, how it started. Basically, if you talk about before Barakpur, it's Behrampur or Bahrampur. In 19th Infantry, they refused in February 1857. They refused to use this Enfield rifle. That time, totally 19th Infantry was disbanded. Then after that, in Barakpur on 29th March, the soldiers of 34th Native Infantry refused to use the greased cartridge, and a Sipahi named Mangal Pandey broke the lines and fired Lieutenant Bog. ସେତେବେଳେ ତାଙ୍କର ଜଣେ ବଡ଼ ଅଧିକାରୀ କି ସେ ଗୁଳି କରିଦେଲେ, ମଙ୍ଗଲ ପାଣ୍ଡେ। Mangal Pandey was hanged on April 8th. So Mangal Pandey was arrested and executed. At Behrampur, which also disobeyed the authorities, were disbanded. Already I spoke about that. The first major outbreak that finally led the revolt of 1857 occurred at Meerut. Following the court martial of 85 Sipahis of the cavalry regiments for refusing to use greased cartridge. ତାଙ୍କର ଥାର୍ଡ କାଭେଲରୀ ରେଜିମେଣ୍ଟ ଥାଏ, ଥାର୍ଡ କାଭେଲରୀ ରେଜିମେଣ୍ଟ ସେମାନେ ରିଫ୍ୟୁଜ୍ କଲେ ୟୁଜ୍ କରିବା ପାଇଁ, ତାଙ୍କୁ ଡିସବ୍ୟାନ୍ କରାଗଲା, ଆଉ ତାଙ୍କୁ ଏପ୍ରିଲ ସମୟରେ ଜେଲରେ ଭର୍ତ୍ତି କରିଦିଆଗଲା। ଆଉ ତାହା ବିରୁଦ୍ଧରେ ତାଙ୍କର ଅନ୍ୟ ସାଥୀମାନେ ବିଦ୍ରୋହକୁ ଓହ୍ଲେଇଲେ। ଆଉ 10 ମେ 1857ରେ on 10th May 1857, the Sipahis broke out in open rebellion, shot their officers, released their fellow Sipahis and marched towards Delhi. So 10 ମେ 1857ରୁ ହିଁ ଆରମ୍ଭ ହେଲା ସିପାହୀ ବିଦ୍ରୋହ। ୟା ପୂର୍ବରୁ ଯଦି ଦେଖିବା ବେହରାମପୁର, ୟା ପୂର୍ବରୁ ଯଦି ଅଧିକା 1806ରେ ମାଦ୍ରାସରେ, 1824ରେ ଗୋଟେ ଡିସକଣ୍ଟେଣ୍ଟ ହେଇଥିଲା ବାରକପୁରରେ, କିନ୍ତୁ 1857 ମେ 10ରୁ ଥରେ ଆରମ୍ଭ ହେଇକି ଇଏ ଚାରିଆଡ଼େ ଖେଳିଯିବ, ଚାରିଆଡ଼େ ସ୍ପ୍ରେଡ୍ କରିଯିବ। ତେଣୁ ମିରଟ ହିଁ ଧରାଯାଏ ଯେ ଏଇଠୁ ହିଁ 1857 ସିପାହୀ ବିଦ୍ରୋହ ବା 1857ର ଗ୍ରେଟ୍ ରିଭୋଲ୍ଟ ଆରମ୍ଭ ହେଇଥିଲା। In 11th May, they entered in Delhi. On 12th May, the Sipahis captured the city of Delhi and occupied the place proclaimed Bahadur Shah II as the Emperor of India. पैलेस को कैप्चर कले, बहादुर शाह सेकेंड को तंकर एम्परर बोली घोषणा कले। अब सेठ ही आरंभ हला 1857 रो विद्रोह 10 मई 1857। Then who where the revolt spread? We'll talk about the places next. Then we'll talk about the Indian leaders who led the revolt. Then we'll talk about the British officials who suppressed the revolt. You have to remember these names. In Delhi, Bahadur Shah II, General Bakt Khan, they led the movement, and Jinat Mahal also, the queen of Bahadur Shah also led the revolt, and John Nicholson and Herschel, they suppressed the revolt in Delhi. In Lucknow, Begum Hazrat Mahal, and her son British Qadri, Ahmadullah, the advisor of the ex-Nawab of Awadh, Wajid Ali Shah, they led the revolt, and Henry Lawrence, he suppressed the revolt in Lucknow, but in latter phase, Colin Campbell, he suppressed the revolt. In Kanpur, Nana Sahib, Tantia Tope, Ajimullah Khan, the advisor of Nana Sahib, they led the revolt, and Colin Campbell, the commander-in-chief, suppressed the revolt. In Jhansi and Gwalior, Lakshmibai and Tantia Tope, in Jhansi, Lakshmibai, in Gwalior, Tantia Tope, they led the revolt, and General Hugh Roach, he suppressed the revolt. In Bareilly, Khan Bahadur Khan led the revolt, and Sir Colin Campbell suppressed the revolt. In Allahabad and Banaras, it's Maulavi Liaquat Ali who led the revolt, and Colonel Wansel suppressed the revolt. In Bihar, Bihar's Jagdishpur, Kanwar Singh and Amar Singh, they led the revolt, and William Taylor suppressed the revolt. If we talk about other areas, in Farrukhabad, Tubjal Hassan Khan, in Bijnoor, Muhammad Khan, in Muradabad, Abdul Ali Khan, in Bareilly, Khan Bahadur Khan, in Mandsaur, Firoz Shah, in Faizabad, Maulavi Ahmadullah, he declared jihad against English or East India Company. In Assam, Kanta Parasur Singh and Maniram Datta. In Odisha, Surendra Sai and Ujjal Sai. In Kullu, Raja Pratap Singh. In Rajasthan, Jaidal Singh and Hardayal Singh. In Gorakhpur, Gajdhar Singh. In Mathura, Sevi Singh and Kadam Singh, they all led the revolt, but before 1st November 1858, all the revolts were suppressed. But many historians, they pointed out it lasted almost 2 years and ended in 1859. But as per the Queen's proclamation, in 1st November 1858, the total revolt was suppressed. So it's officially the revolt ended in 1st November 1858. Next. So we talked what are the causes and who led the revolt. Now we'll talk why the revolt failed. What are the causes of the failure of the rebellion? Basically, the revolt was localized and not countrywide. The revolt was to a great extent localized, limited and ill-organized. The mutiny was not universal. India, such the river Narmada, made no movement of importance. Central and eastern Bengal were undisturbed, and Nepal rendered the British valuable assistance in putting down the revolt. Thus, the revolt was only local and not nationwide. ଯଦି ଆମେ ଦେଖିବା ଦକ୍ଷିଣ ଭାରତରେ ଏ ବିଦ୍ରୋହ ବ୍ୟାପି ନଥିଲା, ଇଷ୍ଟ ବେଙ୍ଗଲ ଆଉ ସେଣ୍ଟ୍ରାଲ ବେଙ୍ଗଲରେ ଏତେ ମାତ୍ରାରେ ବିଦ୍ରୋହ ପ୍ରଭାବ ପଡ଼ିନଥିଲା, ପଞ୍ଜାବ ଆଫଗାନିସ୍ତାନ ଏଇ ଜାଗାମାନଙ୍କରେ ବିଦ୍ରୋହ ପ୍ରଭାବ ଏତେ ମାତ୍ରାରେ ନଥିଲା, ଯାହାଫଳରେ ଏଇଟା ମାତ୍ର ସୀମିତ ଅଞ୍ଚଳରେ ଏ ବିଦ୍ରୋହଟା ଚାଲିଥିଲା ଆଉ ତାହାକୁ ସହଜରେ ସପ୍ରେସ୍ କରିଦିଆଗଲା. The revolt began prematurely. The date fixed for the simultaneous rising in the country was 31st March 1857. The date was known only to the leaders of each organizational center and their officials or their officers of each of the regiments. But certain events made the Indian soldiers impatient for the rebellion, and so the revolt began before the appointed day. प्रथमे से 31 मे 1857 विद्रोह करने भाभी से प्लान भी करेंगे किंतु प्रीमैच्योरली जदि कहबा मंगल पांडे ऑफिसर को गोली करवा मीरठ रे सिपाही मान को बंदी करा 10 मे ही आउटब्रस्ट हो मीरठ रे से आरंभ हो गला विद्रोह एका सांगरे सबुआड़े विद्रोह एका कालीन आरंभ हो नथिला भिन्न भिन्न सागर भिन्न भिन्न समय विद्रोह आरंभ होइतला जहाफल सहजरे कौन सप्रेस कर दिया गला सहजरे ताको दबे दिया गला. Okay, so it began in Meerut on the 10th May. It was a serious suicidal mistake by many historians. And if you talk about the superiority of the English in many fields, the resources of the Britishers' imperialism were unlimited. Fortunately for them, the Crimean War and the wars in which the British were involved out of the India have come to end. Crimea War होतला 1853 से एंड हेगला सेठिका जो सोल्जर मान थिले से भारत पळे आसिले तापर ओपियम वार थला से भी एंड हेगला से मन भी भारत चली आसिले तेणु 1856 बेलू सब प्रकार बाहर घटुवा विद्रोह एंड होता इंग्लिश पाखे बहुत रिसोर्स था. द ब्रिटिश आर्मी वाज एक्सेसिव इन नंबर व्हिच वाज ब्रॉट इनटू इंडिया इन लार्ज नंबर फ्रॉम डिफरेंट पार्ट्स ऑफ द वर्ल्ड एंड मेनी वर सोल्जर्स वर रिक्रूटेड इन इंडिया इटसेल्फ. for the suppress of the mutiny. Jodi ame dekhiba Jind, Kashmir, then if you talk about Hyderabad's Wazir, Hyderabad Prime Minister thile, Jammu Kashmir Prime Minister, Nepal Raja, eman सब साहाଯ୍य कले ए रिवोल्ट को सप्रेस करिबारे. And the British had superior weapons than the rebels had. तांका पाखरे बंदूक थिला, तांका पाखरे गुलीगोला थिला, जोडा कि भारतीय पाखरे नथिला. आमे ट्रेडिशनल वेपन किबा अल्प जो बंदूक लुटिक नेते सेते युद्ध करथले. तांका पाखरे बहुत रिसोर्स थिला, तांका पाखरे टेलीग्राफ थिला, टेलीग्राम थिला, तांका पाखरे रेलवे थिला, गोटे जागर आउट जाको सहजरे पहुंची पारथले. सेमान देयर सुपीरियर if you compare to the Indian revolt, Indian leaders. Then lack of leadership. The lack of leadership among the rebels was another very important cause which brought about the failure of the mutiny. The Indian leaders did not rise against the British till their personal interest had been damaged by the policy of the British government. On the other hand, the English had advantage of having very capable leaders like the Lord Lawrence, Outram, Havelock, Nicholson, Neil, and Edwards, who got success in suppressing the revolt in every possible way. If you compare the central leader, Tankara, Lord Canning, Enkara thile, Kena Bahadur Shah, Bruddha, se chahuna thile leadership neba pai, se padu Canning thile, je trained, sabu kichi, tanga pakare resource achi, au ekarte dekhiba amaro provincial leader, our provincial leader as we Hazrat Mahal, Bijat Padri, Nana Sahib, Rani Jhansi, Ahmadullah, emanko tulanare jo British counterpart thile, provincial leader thile, se Nicholson huanti, Campbell huantu, Outram huantu, semana pakhare resource adhika thila, semana trained thile, tanka pakhare uddeshya thila. And lack of unity and purpose and organization. If you talk, the Indian rebels were not properly organized, and their central organization was very weak. Then mutineers suffered also from lack of unity of purpose. The mutiny had broken out of all of a sudden, and nobody had the idea of that turn in the that it would take. They were divided in their aims with no common political object. There was no unity among them, and they were unable to combine effective for the education of the common plan of the common aim. So then देखिबा 1857 विद्रोह रे जो माने जोगो देइतले समानकर भिन्न भिन्न उद्देश्य थिला. हजरत महल से चाहुतले तांको पुओ को नवाब करिया पाई, नाना साहेब से चाहुतले पेंशन पाया पाई, पेशवाशिप पाया पाई, कुंवर सिंह से तांको निजर जमीदारी बंचया पाई. तो भिन्न भिन्न लोक भिन्न भिन्न उद्देश्य नै लडुतले. एंको भीतर गोटे यूनिटी नथिला, गोटे पर्पज ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन नथिला, आ भलो संगठन नथिला, जोथि पाई ए रिवोल्ट सप्रेस हे गला. नेक्स्ट. So these are the major causes why the revolt failed. Then we'll talk about what's happened after 1857 revolt. We'll talk about the consequence of the revolt of 1857. Basically, the Queen's proclamation of 1858. Queen Victoria issued a proclamation which was read out by Lord Canning, the Governor General of India, who announced the acquisition of the Indian administration by the British Crown at a darbar held at Allahabad on 1st November 1858. Last Governor General Royal Lord Canning was a first Viceroy held India. 1858 November 1 रे British Rani Victoria से घोषणा कले जे एबे ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी रो शासन सरीला. ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी भारत को शासन करबा नै, ए भारत रो शासन दायित्व एबे सीधा चलत रानी को द्वारा हबो, आ ब्रिटिश जो पार्लियामेंट अछि ता द्वारा तार कोन करा जिवो न ताको विजिल करा जिवो. They will see what will happen. The transfer of power from the East India Company to the British Crowns. The transfer of political and administrative power from the East India Company to the British Crown was achieved through the Act for Better Government of India in 1858. Under this Act, India would be governed directly by the Crown, acting through a Secretary of State. He was made directly responsible to the British Parliament. As we said, East India Company शासन एठी तार अंत घटिला आ आरंभ हैला ब्रिटिश सीधा सड़क शासन भारत. तेणु 1857 विद्रोह यह गोटे बड़ फलाफल थिला. द पॉलिसी ऑफ annexation was given up. आउ सेमान विस्तार नीति को सेट बंद कले, आ विस्तार कलेनी. द क्वीन डिक्लेयर्ड दैट she had no desire to annex more territories to the British Empire. The British authorities realized the importance of the princely states and wanted their support to the British rule in India. एठू से विशेष करके जो रहिले प्रिंसली स्टेट सेमानकर गुरुत्व बुझिले, जो देश राज्य रहे से गुरुत्व बुझिले अधिक आनेक्सेसन करेंगे अधिक राज्य विस्तार करेंगे तो डिक्लेयर कले क्विल और विस्तार नीतिर भी अंत घटला। तेणु 1858 विद्रोह को देखा यह अनेक ये सफल था, अनेक गुण सफल था, यार अनेक किसी विफलता भी थिला, फेल हो गला, लीडर माने यूनाइटेड हो पारे ना, तार अनेक कारण था। बट व्हेन कॉन्सिक्वेंस ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी रूल एंडेड and directly British, if you talk about directly, the British crown directly rule over India is the consequence. So basically today we talked about 1857 revolt, we talked how the revolt means the nature and the character of the revolt, we tried to understand the nature and character, then we tried to understand the causes of the revolt, we talked about the political causes, we talked about the social and religious causes, we talked about the economic causes, then we talked about the military causes, then we talked about what is the immediate cause of the revolt, then we talked who led where, the outburst of the revolt and the spread of the revolt, then we talked why the revolt failed, the causes of the failure or the factors that are responsible for the failure of the revolt, then we talked the consequence of the revolt of 18